What is your first memory of using a computer? When I was in grade school we had the Apple Cart, which was a group of kids, not sure how they picked us, who got to go to the computer lab and tool around with the old Apple IIEs. With the green/black screen, and those thin black actually floppy disks. I distinctly remember working with some turtle program. You'd tell it how many you wanted the turtle to do, and in what direction, and it would draw a line. Theoretically you could get it to draw a design of some sort, though I don't think any of us ever accomplished much. Later Apple Cart was renamed MacPac and we tooled around on somewhat nicer Apple computers. Thinking back, I feel like it was just 6 or 8 of us higher performing kids who got to go do it, which seemed pretty messed up, in retrospect. Maybe the other kids went at a different time. This was late 80s elementary in Colorado, USA. I remember wanting to learn Microsoft Paint, but didn't know how to open it. So I was just able to draw the selection rectangle by dragging the pointer across the desktop. But then later I figured out that I was able to edit photos in Microsoft Paint by clicking the paintbrush button in Windows Image Viewer. OS was WinXP. So I always had to make a copy of one of my photos, edit it, erase everything using an eraser, until I got a blank canvas to draw stuff. My dad bought a computer in 1983, 2 years before I was born, so I've never known life without one in the house. My first memory of it is playing Dig Dug, which I kicked ass at. I would have been 3 or 4 years old at the time. Our Commodore 64 that my dad bought as a college student. We had a pirated copy of a game called Fleet Feet. Later we had amazing titles such as Donald's Playground and Mission Impossible. Most of the games had an opening screen that said, "Cracked by the Bomb Brothers." At the Naval Academy in 1974. It was a Honeywell. We played a space war game on it. Loaded the program with a paper strip full of holes. Was invited there, based on my SAT score. Annapolis invited the top 500 scorers from the country for their first science and technology seminar. When my dad took me with him, when he made rounds in the hospital he would leave me alone in the conference room and let me play the desktop there. I always played this game where a dude skis down a mountain and you have to avoid trees and Sasquatches. Fun times. Back in, I wanna say, 1996, my father brought home an old IBM. I thought it was the most amazing thing I'd ever seen, and spent hours playing Chips Challenge, the cat/mouse game, dicking around with paint, and flipping around with settings, because I thought I could potentially be a computer genius. Ron Howard, he wasn't. A few months later, my brother came home with Heretic, an old school Doom clone, and it operated at absolute snail's pace on that old rig. That was the moment I realized that, maybe, there were better things on the horizon, when it came to tech. Still, messing around with that old machine, was like opening a magic door. I came from a rough neighborhood, didn't have cable, used bunny ears on RTV, and having that old PC gave me a sense of discovering a new world. So, despite the fact that my phone can probably operate all of that old machine's data in half a second, I'll always hold a special place in my heart for it. No idea how old I was, but sitting on my dad's lap helping him play Castle Wolfenstein. I was in charge of shooting and pulling the lever on the slot machines. Sometime in the early 90s. I have a photo of 4 or 5-year-old me helping him. The photo definitely wasn't the first time. My first memory using one on my own was using Microsoft DOS to load up Commander Keen. When I was about 5 years old, my dad convinced his bosses to get him a Commodore 64 so he could do some of his work at home. It amazes me to this day that they took him up on it. We were not rich, a single income blue-collar household in a poor part of town, and it was surely the only personal computer in a mile's radius. He didn't just use it for work, naturally. A friend of his gave us a bunch of video games on 5.25 floppies, and we had a couple of joysticks. So we played a lot of games. My favorite was called Wizard. My brother liked Hot Wheels. Mom's favorite was Dino Eggs. Sometimes, mom let us hook the thing up to our color TV, and that was a big deal. One year for Halloween, I even dressed up as a C64, or, technically, a monitor hooked up to a C64. Mom made it from a cardboard box with holes cut for my head and arms and painted the starting screen on the front. Load asterisk 8,1 loading. Ready run. Lol. Freaking ancient. I remember the box arriving. It had Sinclair on it and inside was a black wedge shape with red lettering that said ZX81. The setup was simple. Plug power adapter into the wall, other end into the machine. Then had to connect the wires for the cassette player. Final connection was to the back of the old TV. We flipped it on and nothing until we realized that there was no power light and also that the TV had to tune into the computer. We tuned it in and were greeted with a white screen showing a black square for the cursor. The keyboard had the commands printed onto it and with the help of the manual we loaded the first game, Pong. No color, no sound, and only capital letters. But we were amazed. We could actually put something onto the TV. Pong for the ZX81 sucked, so when left alone I found that I could edit the game, so I did one change at a time. That little computer, with 1K of RAM, taught me a lot about programming and code efficiency. I had a buddy who lived nearby. He had also got a ZX81 as a gift, so we used to swap modified games and we would chat on the CB, so I could tell him how to load games. Later that summer someone put one of the game tapes into the stereo and press play. While I was on the CB radio, my mate cursed because it came across the CB so loud and squealy and clear. This gave me and my brother an idea. Maybe we could connect the ZX to the CB and send messages, so we did. It was very slow because to send a message, but we felt like wizards. After a few days we were the most hated people in the area because CB was used a lot, so the squeals drowned everyone out. My parents dealt with a lot of complaints and threats, so I was told to stop it. If only we had been allowed to carry on. Fun times, and glad I started there. We got one Christmas. We went on a treasure hunt round the house that led to where the computer had been set up. There was an egg timer by it, and we were told we could only use it till the egg timer ran out. For years I was convinced that the computer would only work in 15-minute bursts. We had a computer class in elementary school, and the earliest memory I have was sending emails to one another in the class. Unfortunately, the internet was very slow, so only like 2 people in my class actually received an email during the class period. Quite a few early educational games. Not sure which came first. The oldest was probably Fatty Bear's Birthday Surprise, which I remember my mother had to switch to DOS to run from Windows 95 or 98. I didn't know it at the time of course, but I've pieced together that that must have been what was happening. At school there was a typing program of some sort on a very old PC that was command line only. Not sure if it was DOS or BASIC or what, but this computer was a lot older than the others which ran Windows and had Oregon Trail sequel/knockoffs. My earliest memories of really using the computer myself are of playing slightly later games like Putt Putt and Pajama Sam, Math Blasters, some kind of Busy Town game, some kind of airport exploration game, some kind of interactive encyclopedia software I remember using for school projects. I distinctly remember my mother showing me how to use a task manager to kill stuff when it froze, so she didn't have to keep fixing it. In 6th grade, 1979 to 80 school year, a few of us got to take turns using the 1 or 2 computers in some small room. I distinctly remember playing Lemonade Stand. After getting a weather forecast for the day, you had to determine how many supplies to purchase and what price to charge for the lemonade. It was a pretty good introduction to businesses for a 6th grader. My uncle worked at a technical college as a systems analyst I was visiting. He showed me how to use punch cards to make programs and change the reel to reel tapes on the server floor, not room, entire floor of the building. 1984-ish. Tandy Radio Shack computer. Back in the early 80s, it had some weird looking Pac-Man clone littering the TV. Soon after it was the Apple IIC, with lots of bootlegged games, such as Wolfenstein, Pac-Man, the original Mario Brothers, Puan, Zork, Lode Runner, and Flight Simulator. Next came my love, the Commodore Amiga 500. It was the greatest time of my adolescent life to discover computer gaming. It was downhill ever since. Nothing could ever replicate that early feeling. Though some titles did make great new memories, I always look back at my firsts. Though I nominate our previous decade 2010, 2019 as the most corrupt decade of decrepit video games in history. I think better times are finally coming as of 2020.